This past weekend was the Pokemon trading card game regional tournament for Portland, Oregon, and there was quite a few decks that popped off that did really well at the tournament, so we're going to be covering those, the top 10, along with some of the underrated hidden gems that I saw on Limitless that made it into day 2. With that said, if you're new, welcome to the channel. My name is Christian, and welcome back if you're already subscribed. You already know I cover a lot of Pokemon card content, from openings, reviews, meta-analysis, and of course deck profiles. Also, I won a tournament the other week, or this past weekend, with Ampharos. I'll have the vlog pop up at the end. You can watch it. It's just a 1-minute vlog. Starting things off, we have Palkia V-Star with Ice Rider, piloted by Brayden Alfert, who has been playing this deck for quite a bit and is, I'd say, one of the top tier players in the game. They're always consistently doing well at major events. They got 107 out of this huge regionals. Palkia is a little spicy to be running in this meta, especially with the population of Miraidon players running around. However, this deck does have a lot of other great attackers in it, including Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX. You also have Mute EX as an attacker, and Shenpao and Radiant Greninja as well for some sniping action. The next underrated list that I really have to mention involves Venusaur VMAX. Yes, Venusaur VMAX made it to day 2 of a major Pokemon trading card. What? Yeah. Played by Brian Myers, getting 103rd place. We have Arceus Giratina with Venusaur VMAX. So it's your kind of typical Arctina deck that you would expect. You know, you got the Bidoof engine in there, or Bidoof and Bibarel engine for your draw. You got Spiritomb in there to make your life easier against Mew. But the really spicy stuff in this deck is the Venusaur V and VMAX. So let's just take a look real quick at what Venusaur VMAX can actually do. It's a Pokemon that has a hefty amount of HP, but not only that, it is also a great attacker going into decks like Roaring Moon and also Charizard EX in particular. Arctina already played Grass Energies to begin with, so now that you have another alternate attacker that can use these energies and be really strong in pretty much any kind of matchup, it's cool to see, you know, Venusaur VMAX pop off. On to 102nd, we have a deck played by Matthew Stratford, which is Arceus and Regigigas V-Star. Not a deck I expected to see, and I also believe we have one of these decks in top 8. I believe Makani Tran made top 8 with a similar build. But coming in at 102nd place, we just want to give a quick little shout out here to Matthew for his great performance. The next underrated road deck we got a shout out is Cloth Hisuian Electrode. Played by James Musser, he got 89th place. This was the highest placing Cloth. The second highest one was played by Peter DeMartino, who got 138. So here's your look at might be the best way to play Cloth Electrode at this moment. Some notable inclusions to this list include the Luxurious Cape, which will really amp up those Cloth HP numbers, making it 220. I'm also a big fan of the Grant supporter card in this deck, and one thing that might have came up, which I know what happened to me at a local event, is when you prize your 2 Brute Bonnets, you're in a world of pain, and they only have 2 Brute Bonnets in this deck, but they were able to get away with it, and a best of 3. I guess you can kind of even out the prizes being pretty bad over time. I'm a huge fan of Cloth Electrode, and if you want to see me play it at a Pokemon tournament locally, let's get this video to 469 thumbs up. If we do that, I will bring it to the very upcoming tournament, whether it's a challenge, a cup, or a just regular weekly. Coming in at 83rd place, we have Ray Chen with Greedent VMAX. Yes, Greedent VMAX, another VMAX Pokemon I wasn't expecting to see do well at a regional event. This time they paired it with Iron Valiant, which makes a lot of sense, and then you also have Palkia V-Star, Radiant Greninja in here too, and Suicune V. This deck's premise is all about chipping away the health points of your opponent's Pokemon and then cleaning it up with Greedent VMAX to take some bonus prize cards. Honestly, this deck looks really well optimized, and some very notable inclusions in this list that really make it more consistent in taking those extra prize cards would have to be Toy Catcher and Echoing Horn. Toy Catcher, if you don't know, basically is a boss's orders and an item card for Pokemon that have like 50 HP or less, something like that. I'll have the actual card on screen right now. And so basically, you just chip away at your opponent's Pokemon, Toy Catcher, and then Greedent VMAX cleans up the day. And you can also use Palkia V-Star and supporter cards like Melanie to accelerate those energies onto the Greedent VMAX. Not only that, they also have Echoing Horn in the list too, which is fantastic for bringing out those small little baby Pokemon from the discard pile, and then you just get to take some more bonus prize cards off them once again. So shout out to Ray Chen with his very impressive Rogue Greedent VMAX deck list. 46th place, we have Paul Abarca, who played Golden Go Palkia V-Star. Golden Go and Palkia V-Star have been seeing quite a bit of popularity rise in the last couple of weeks, especially I think due to the fact that it did so well performing at a huge 3,000 player Pokemon card tournament in Kyoto during their Champions League event. And I actually got to play against a Golden Go Palkia in my most recent challenge where I beat it in the final match, and that is a slightly unfavored matchup for Miraidon because Golden Go, you know, they just make it rain, and hitting that 260 is pretty hard to do as a Miraidon player. But yeah, getting back to this list, it looks really consistent as well. You get to threaten Cross Switcher in here too, which is really handy because you can search out Cross Switchers with Irida, you can get them off of Pokestop, and then you also have Palkia V-Star being a big energy acceleration option in this deck. And best of all, the water energies, like you can attack with the Palkia, but you can also discard the water energies because Golden Go EX's actual attack can be any basic energies. So it synergizes really well with the metal energies and the water energies in the deck. This is a deck I definitely could see raising in popularity over the next couple of weeks or months before rotation hits. When rotation hits, I'm not too sure what's going to happen. It might even see a better time because there's a lot less Path to the Peak you're going to have to worry about because Path does rotate out. But at the end of the day, this deck does have 4 Pokestops and 3 workers. So there's a lot of times where you can path this deck and it doesn't even matter. They're going to have an out to it instantly. On to 45th place, we have a high placing Iron Valiant Entei list, similar to what came in 2nd place at the Latin American International Championships. Iron Valiant and Entei are still feasting on those small decks that have a lot of baby Pokemon involved. And this deck also has some technology in it, the de-evolution TM, that you can also grab at some point in the game with Seal Stone, or if you just get it off of your raw draws. Being able to hurt your opponent and then devolve them is really big. Jared Grimes ended up going with a classic, clean, simple list for a Shen Pao. They've been a Shen Pao demon for as long as I can remember. The same length probably I've been playing Miraidon for so long. They decided to go the old school route. No Iron Hands EX, and it paid off for them big time. I mean, hey, top 32 is a Grand USN prizing and a booster box too, and a whole bunch of championship points. Congrats to Jared Grimes on a fantastic run with the classic OG version of Shen Pao, featuring of course Cross Switchers, Canceling Cologne, and of course all those supporter cards. And by all, I'm joking, it's 4 Irida, 1 Iono. Just one placement above Jared Grimes. At 22nd place, we have Roaring Moon EX, played by Raymond Liu. This is a pretty standard version of Roaring Moon that we've seen in the past. This again is the highest placing Roaring Moon list at this tournament. It didn't do as well as I think top 4 or top 8 like that Darkrai V-Star version did in Kyoto for their Champions League, but 22nd place at a big best of 3 majors is also a really great placement for Roaring Moon. I'm still not really a believer of the deck. I've had quite a few friends become traders and leave Miraidon for Dark Miraidon in Roaring Moon, so I'll have to give this deck a shot eventually. I do have the cards to build it, but if you want to play Roaring Moon, this seems to be one of the most consistent ways to play it. A lot of local players I've seen have also been doing the no Pokestop build. Instead, they're using Town Store because Town Store allows for a much more consistent version of the deck to be played compared to relying on Pokestops and hoping that there's good luck and bad luck on certain things, you know. But Town Store allows you to grab those charms, it allows you to grab those ancient booster energy capsules, and of course for a Seal Stone. So if you were going to play Roaring Moon, I would recommend either the Darkrai V-Star version, which was in my top 10 decks for 2024, or if you want to go with this more vanilla consistent version without the Darkrai, just the Roaring Moons as the main attackers, then you can check out this list too. On to 20th place, we have the highest placement for a Stall deck at the regionals. So if you're a fan of Stall, this is a deck you might want to give a whirl. We have this list played by Hale Orbornaltil. I butchered your name, I'm sorry fam, but Hale O. There you go. 20th place, Pidgeot Engine. You got Luxray in here for some hand disruption. You got Charizard to be a potential attacker if need be. And you also have Chayu EX, which is also nasty. It actually just mills like the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. So I lost a game like that to a control player locally where they surprised me with the Chayu. So this is the last list before we get to the top 10 decks at the Portland Regional Tournament. We have in 15th place, Yosha Riley. they played Rapid Strike, Urshifu, VMAX, or just Rapid Strike Toolbox. This is one of the best decks in the game in my opinion. It has a really solid matchup spread across the board. A deck that I'm very, very scared of, especially if they choose to go second. And getting top 16 at 15th place is no easy task, so congrats to Yoshi. Number 10, it's actually also the deck type that actually won the regional tournament. We got Giratina V-Star featuring the Lost Zone engine with Comfy. Played by Daniel Huger. We're not going to get into too much detail on this list. However, things that really do stick out to me for this list is 2 copies of Counter Catcher, 2 copies of Boss's Orders, and they only have 2 water energies. So they're not going to rely too heavily on the Moonlight Shuriken attack. The second 1 water energy sent to the Lost Zone, that chance is over. But it can also lead to being a bait at some point in the game where your opponent is kind of now forced to bench the Manaphy to respect their Greninja play, and then you can just clean him up with Sableye. So congrats to Daniel, but since we have some more Giratinas in the top 10, we'll spend some more time with those lists. On to 9th place, we have Charizard EX, played by Keaton Gill. There's also another Charizard in this list, so we're going to spend more time with them. But here's a look at Keaton's list. It looks super standard and consistent, pretty much what we've seen from the list that Azul Garcia Griego played to win the San Antonio regionals, so I don't really think there's too much that changed up in this list. Now on to our top 8. We're starting off with Ian Robb. Ian Robb also recently signed to the Shuffle Squad, so congratulations to Ian. And if you guys aren't familiar with Ian, he's definitely one of the top players in the game as well. He's won a few regionals, or at least one regional in the past, because I remember using his list at one point. I believe he got second at NEIC, losing to Cyrus Davis in the finals. And the list that Ian Robb actually played to get 8th place is the exact 60 card list that the current world champion Vance Kelly used to get 12th place at this tournament, and Travis Beckwith also got 65th place. And you know, hearing Vance Kelly's name, you can probably guess what deck Ian Robb chose for this, and it is Mew VMAX. Mew VMAX, man, what a deck. What a deck. This is Mew VMAX DTE with Fusion Strike energy. No, there's no Meloetta in this deck. No, there's no Ice Cube. The Fusion Strike energies are in this deck simply to be a tech card against Spiritomb, the biggest weakness to Mew DTE. This is basically your super consistent, straightforward DTE Mew VMAX list, but instead of, you know, teching special cards for other matchups like Crushing Hammers and Grabbers and Cross Switchers, the true spice in this list is the Fusion Strike energy and the consistency to be able to play the game all the time. So that is what it took for Mew to really pop off at a tournament. Be Mew DTE, but also have Fusion Strike energies just to counter those Spiritombs that are floating around, ruining Mew players' days, like it ruined mine in San Antonio. Moving on to 7th place, we also have a list that was played by 3 different players, 3 top players, the exact same 60 card list. So 7th place, we have Azul Garcia Griego, aka Azul GG. Azul is the most recent Pokemon regional champion crowned in the San Antonio regionals, and he played a Charizard EX deck. And so he brought back Charizard for this particular regionals, but did a little bit of switching around with some of the cards. And when I say switching around, pun is intended, because he literally added a switch card to this deck. It's pretty much the same kind of list that we saw out of him from San Antonio. However, he does not have the justified gloves in this list to account for sort of like the mirror matchup, and instead switch card is the chosen tech. Along with, they also dropped, I believe, 1 fire energy, so they're only playing with 6 fire energy, but they did include 2 super rods in this list, because, you know, manually attaching in this list isn't really that important. It's all about just evolving to your Charizard, and the energies will flock to it like seagulls do at a beach when you have chips and Tim Hortons and all that. You know what I mean? It's like a moth to a flame. Going into this tournament, Charizard definitely had a big target on its back. That's why there was an uptick in God of War players in comparison to a previous regional, San Antonio, and with that as well, allowed the increase in more Giratina players to be out there, because Stall was a really strong matchup going into Charizard as well, but Lost Tina has a pretty good matchup against both Stall and Charizard. It has a pretty much good matchup across the board, so it makes sense that Charizard did make a top 8 once again. On to number 6, we have Mackenny Tran, who played Arceus V-Star with Regigigas V-Star. This is a deck that I did not see coming at all. This one really surprised me. It definitely surprised a lot of people as well, seeing it played on stream, although Mackenny did not really get to play the game when it came to that particular stream game. So I'm sure a lot of you guys got to see. And you might be wondering, what the heck does Regigigas V-Star even do? And what is the whole premise of this deck? And well, just looking at it, you can see those nice juicy counts of Sharon's Care at 2. And if you didn't know, Arceus and Regigigas V-Star are some pretty hefty Pokemon. So basically, you're gonna play one, then the other, attack with one, charge up the other, and then Sharon's Care, run away, send up your next big beefy HP boss Pokemon, and then tank a hit, and then run away and go again. Some other fun things to note about this deck is it does have Zacian V in here to guarantee you can kind of get an attachment every single turn, especially turn 1, the most important turn for Arceus decks. You also got Mew in here too, and then you got Spiritomb in here to counteract those Mew decks, along with all decks that have Pokemon Vs. You got Jirachi in here as well to respect the Sableye out there, and it looks like a pretty straightforward tanky anti-metal build of Arceus V-Star. On to number 5. Number 5, I am so excited to see, and I'm very happy to talk about. It was played by Nicholas Moffat, and we're talking about, you guessed it, Miraidon EX. Yes, and it's not the turbo variant. I was telling you guys a little bit online before this regional came up. People were asking me, what do you think the best version of Miraidon is to play right now? And I personally think it's still the hybrid version. And I would say, I could say I was right, because that's what Nicholas Moffat played. He played a hybrid version of Miraidon EX. Now, the major things to notice about this deck is that they dropped the Raikou count down to 1. I went for 2 copies of Raichu, which is something I was expecting to see because Sajin Park, the Miraidon King of Asia, recently played a list like that with the 1 Raikou, the 2 Raichus, over in their big like kind of regional-esque level tournament. Although Sajin Park did go for more of a turbo version of the build. And then because of the increase of Charizard just dominating the meta, this deck has to have a way to counter Charizard, and the main tech card in this deck, or the only tech card in this deck, actually no, the main Pokemon tech card in this deck would have to be the Tapu Koko EX. Tapu Koko EX, for those of you guys who don't know, will do 30 damage for 2 electric energies, or 1 electric, 1 colorless. However, the caveat here is if you had your Pokemon knocked out by damage during the previous turn, specifically damage, I've taken some L's because they use a Giratina's Star Requiem, that's an effect, but if you have a Pokemon knocked out by damage the previous turn, which Charizard has to deal, then you can just tandem unit this card to your bench, Dynamotor, attach, bring it into the active, and swing for 120, so 30 plus 90 for 120, and then you paralyze them. You get to steal a turn away from them, and this is great against not only Charizard, but all decks. Good against Gardevoir, good against Tina, good against any deck in the game that doesn't really have switch outs available on demand. The supporter count is pretty solid, but they went for more of a streamlined, consistent disruption instead of the 3 Iono, 1 Judge a lot of people have been doing. They went for 2 Iono, 2 Judge, which would make a lot of sense because they also have 2 copies of Path to the Peak in here and 2 copies of Beach Court. A major thing to consider for this list is something I'm going to be testing out myself in my current list that I'm building. It is the lack of Bravery Charm, and instead Nicholas Moffat went for 2 EXP shares. Now, this is really strong, especially because you have 2 copies of Raichu V. Now, there's a lot of games where you lose as Miraidon because you're literally 1 energy short. EXP share fixes that up real nice. It also is a great tool to attach to your Mew EX, making Mew EX an instantly huge, way bigger threat than it was before for the return KOs, especially against decks like Giratina. The EXP shares do allow for just more energies to stay on the board, which is very, very handy. So I'm currently testing out 1 Bravery Charm, 1 EXP share. I'm not completely sold on getting rid of Bravery Charm completely. I think you definitely need it in some of the mirror matches, of course, along with just other decks that have a harder time hitting more than 220 super easily. The Bravery Charm is really big also for Iron Hands as well. It worked out for Nicholas Moffat. Definitely a list you might want to consider if you're playing hybrid Miraidon, and you guys can expect a lot more streams on the channel with me and Miraidon, you know, getting some more practice on stream along with testing out different versions. So if you want to hang out live, subscribe to the channel. We also just turned on memberships as well, so we have some fun membership perks available, but I'll talk about those in some other video, not in this video. And so on to the top 4, we have Bodhi Robinson, who played Gardevoir EX, and this list looks really, really good. You got the 4 VIP passes in here, and the 2 major sort of, you could say, tech cards, the cards to really make note of in this list is the inclusion of both Zacian V, and a Screamtail, and they decided to not play the luxurious cape. So you have Screamtail in here to snipe 160 damage or less on your opponent's side of the field. Usually you're going to be able to take down a Squawkabilly or a weakened Pokemon. And then of course Zacian V is a really nice 1-hit KO option to have in this deck when when baby Gardevoir isn't able to be on the board anymore because he got knocked out previously. And of course, it doesn't hurt to Roar the Sword some games if you do have a rough turn 1 and you prize multiple rolls. I like to see Gardevoir stonks on the rise. As long as it's not the slow playing Gardevoirs, then I have an issue with that. On to the top 2. Now the top 2, if you guys missed it, you have to go back and watch the Pokemon Regional Finals for Portland, because that final match was so sick. I posted my reaction on Instagram story and everything. It was like the grand finals of that final matchup was so freaking cool. Let's get to the top 2 decks. Number 2, played by Samuel Hugh, is Giratina V-Star, and the number 1 deck, played by John Eng, Giratina V-Star as well. Now this wasn't a complete straight 60 mirror match, so let's talk about Samuel's deck first. So the big things to take note of from Samuel's list is he played a version that did not have the Manaphy in it. He also has 1 copy of just the good old regular Switch, and he also has the Devo TM, and 1 less Water Energy. Now onto John Eng's list, which does have the Manaphy inside of it. The energy line is pretty consistent from what we've been seeing from a lot of top players' Giratina lists. 4 Jet, 4 Psychic, 3 Grass, and 3 Water. That way Greninja is still always a threat in every single game. And John Eng did play 1 less copy of Path to the Peak, meaning his Greninja could be more lively during the games, being able to conceal cards, while Samuel played 4 and also just took the idea of not being able to Moonlight Shuriken very often more seriously, just by having the 2 Water and 4 Path. So Greninja's kind of like just like a tech card there in the deck, while John Eng had Moonlight Shuriken and concealed cards become something that could be more useful throughout a lot more of the games, not having to path himself as frequently. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button down below. It helps me out a ton. You can click on screen to see my most recent tournament vlog where I won it with Ampharos, and you can click here to see the San Antonio Pokemon Regionals as well. I'll catch you guys in the next video, and comment down below what deck you're playing right now, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.